Hello, everybody, and welcome to What the Fact, your weekly look at the facts and the falsehoods that are filling your news feed and your television screens, because it's 2018 and everyone's paying a lot of money to run a lot of television ads right now. I'm Aaron Shirachman.
And I'm Katie Sanders. We're editors with PolitiFact, the largest fact-checking website in the United States of America. We have a lot to cover this week, including President Donald Trump's misstatements about hurricanes that affected Puerto Rico.
Yeah, but first up, we're actually going to look at some more hurricane misinformation. This is something, a meme that's probably been in your newsfeed, a photo you've probably seen. It was shared by Donald Trump Jr. and many others. It's casting CNN as fake news for its coverage from Hurricane Florence, suggesting that the hurricane wasn't as bad as CNN portrayed it in order to try to make Donald Trump look bad. So we have this picture from Anderson Cooper. He's standing in a ditch that make water levels seem higher than they were. This is the claim. Variations of the post have generated thousands of social shares online, including one from, as I said, President Trump's oldest son, Donnie Jr.
Yeah, Donald Trump Jr. was actually sharing a Breitbart article that was talking about CNN's ratings, but the important thing for people to know is that there are several problems with this meme, not the least of which is the year, and also the storm, and also completely missing context. So first up, it's time for our recurring segment, Newsfeed Nonsense.
This image of Anderson Cooper has circulated far and wide in the last week or so. A lot of people sharing it seem to think it proves CNN is exaggerating floodwater depths in the wake of Hurricane Florence. Those people include Donald Trump Jr., who tweeted the picture with this caption: "It's a shame that CNN's ratings are down 41%. What's worse is there's a simple solution that they refuse to accept. Stop lying to try to make @RealDonaldTrump look bad." There are so many things wrong with that tweet. First of all, this image isn't from Hurricane Florence. It's from Hurricane Ike. That was a decade ago. George W. Bush was president. While Donald Trump Jr. didn't explicitly claim the image was from Florence, plenty of people who shared the picture did. On to the next falsehood. This picture doesn't capture Anderson Cooper lying. He's literally standing in near waist-deep water. The crew working with him is standing on higher ground to keep the camera dry. That doesn't make the floodwaters he's standing in any less deep. Cooper spent some time debunking these claims on his show.
As for those who think I was kneeling or faking the water level or making it look worse than it was or standing in some sort of a hole, this is an area where people had been trapped on the roofs of their homes by water. Cooper
went on to show video from that broadcast 10 years ago in which he's clearly walking around in the deep water and in which he acknowledges a nearby road which was on higher ground. He said he didn't want to stand on it to avoid being in the way of rescuers who were driving on it.
The idea that I am kneeling in water to make it look deep is frankly idiotic.
As for the claim about ratings, that's way out of context. The 41% drop compared a week in early September to the same week last year. At that time in 2017, Hurricane Irma was slamming Puerto Rico and Florida. You can bet there was a spike in CNN's viewership that week. The comparison for the following week showed CNN's ratings bounced right back and actually increased double digits from a year before. All of that aside, the floods resulting from Hurricane Florence are devastating. Entire portions of southeastern North Carolina are cut off. Interstates are completely covered in water. Dozens of people have died from the storm.
Okay, Aaron, so I think it should be pretty clear to the viewers at home by this point that this did not get a very favorable rating on our Truth-O-Meter. So Tell us, go ahead and spoil the rating for us.
Yeah, we rated this claim pants on fire false.
Our worst rating.
Yeah, so obviously here there's much more to the story than just the photo lets on. Of course, this photo was taken in 2008 during Hurricane Ike in Texas, not 2018 in North Carolina during Hurricane Florence.
Just small details.
Anderson Cooper actually did a great job fact-checking this in a 10-minute segment on his own show, saying that he doesn't usually want to respond to questions about his reporting, but he felt compelled to give the viewers on CNN and others a chance to kind of really understand what was happening. He then played several clips from that coverage in Hurricane Ike in Texas in 2008, in which it makes clear he is making clear that he is standing in water that is deeper than just water nearby him. He said he wanted to stay off a road so that emergency responders could go back and forth. He was also showing, he says, the potential perils of driving near or off the road because the water gets deep so quickly. I think if you watch the full presentation that Anderson Cooper had from 2008, again, not 2018, you would understand that he wasn't trying to deceive people and make things worse than they were. You saw that clip on, I think it was maybe from the Weather Channel, where you had a reporter who was kind of bracing against the wind, and you had two guys kind of just walking behind him in shorts. This wasn't that. This wasn't an attempt to be kind of maybe potentially misleading. He was just reporting a storm. And then Donald Trump Jr. and others used this maliciously to paint a picture that really isn't accurate.
That wasn't the only thing we fact-checked.
Yeah, no, we actually saw some more misinformation lurking in the floodwaters.
In the depths. Falsehoods in the depths.
Yes.
So it was the giant shark meme,
Giant shark!
Everybody knows about the giant shark meme, right?
I don't think so.
Actually, I think when we present it, people are still kind of fooled. We've seen this shark appear after Hurricane Harvey in Texas. He appeared after Sandy in New Jersey. The shark is a storm chaser, but he actually wasn't the real shark, this picture in this like very easily manipulated Photoshop that goes around. It's not from a storm at all, right?
Yeah, no, it's not from a storm at all. This is actually a photoshopped shark that was inserted into another image of water. The original shark was actually taken from an Africa Geographic magazine in 2005. This is just all kind of hogwash and bogusness. I think actually at some level it's now a joke to a lot of people, but unfortunately, because the information that it is a joke doesn't travel with the shark and the photo, people continually share it, continue to share it wrongly and correctly, suggesting that, oh my gosh, I mean, look what's washed ashore on our streets. All right, after the break, we're going to take a look at Donald Trump. He's making a lot of comments about a hurricane, not Hurricane Florence, but Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, making many claims about saying that the media is exaggerating both the death toll and underplaying his and his administration's response to the storm last year. We'll sort out the fact from fiction when we get back. Welcome back, everybody, to What the Fact. I'm Aaron. This is Katie, and now it's time to talk about Donald Trump.
As always, our segment Trump Watch looks at the latest statements coming out of the White House and a lot of times President Donald Trump's Twitter feed. We will get to that. But most recently, Donald Trump has been very defensive about claims that his administration's response to the really catastrophe in Puerto Rico after last year's hurricane season has been insufficient. He said, no. He actually said it was a great untold story, their success. So recently, he went after Puerto Rico's kind of existing infrastructure that really didn't work at all after the hurricanes. He said the situation was really bad before the storms kept rolling in. So what he actually said, before he started questioning death counts, he said
their electric grid and their electric generating plant was dead before the storms ever hit. It was in very bad shape. It was in bankruptcy. And when the storm hit, they had no electricity essentially before the storm. And when the storm hit, that took it out entirely.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. Luckily, we're professional fact checkers, so we're going to do it for you. It's time for Trump Watch.
In the run-up to Hurricane Florence, you probably remember President Donald Trump saying this about the federal response to Hurricane Maria.
I think that Puerto Rico was an incredible, unsung success.
He later tried to claim the close to 3,000 person death toll wasn't accurate. There were some other claims that the president made at the time that were overshadowed and didn't get quite as much attention.
The problem with Puerto Rico is their electric grid and their electric generating plant was dead before the storms ever hit. It was in very bad shape. It was in bankruptcy. Had no money. It was largely closed.
The electric grid was in very bad shape, yes, but it wasn't dead. all electric customers were being served in Puerto Rico before Hurricanes Irma and Maria came through. That said, about 30% of the island's power generating plants were offline before the storms. That's not the same thing as the power grid, though. The president's reference to the Puerto Rican electric utility's financial situation is accurate. It was bankrupt. It still is. It has about $9 billion in debt. And the island's electric grid was very fragile. It has a history of easily triggered, widespread, and prolonged power outages. So Puerto Rico's electric utility was unreliable and vulnerable before Irma and Maria. But it wasn't dead. All electric customers were being served before the storms, and between Irma and Maria, the government was able to get the lights back on for 96% of its electric customers. It took almost 11 months for power to come back on island-wide after Maria.
All right, Katie, so the president here is kind of taking a claim too far. It's not the first time we've heard that. It won't be probably the last time. And exaggerated the situation when it comes to the power grid in Puerto Rico. Walk us through it.
So we rated this claim half true.
Mm-hmm.
Half true means the statement's partially accurate, but it's omitting critical information, right? So it's important for our readers and viewers to remember, first of all, that there's a difference between the electric grid and generating plants. Right. Plants, of course, produce electricity using fossil fuels. The grid ensures that power gets to the areas that need it.
Yeah, and Trump was right in talking about the grid being in bad shape. Outages were something that happened on the island, but it wasn't dead or closed. So he went too far in that. And unlike in the United States, where if there's an outage in Ohio, for instance, the power companies can kind of connect to grids in Illinois, the island's electric system relies on reserves on which Puerto Rico kind of falls short. So they don't really have the capacity to deal with outages.
So this is an example, I guess, of Donald Trump deflecting part of the blame, I guess, for the situation, putting it on local officials. That's been a recurring theme we've seen in the coverage of his response. So we, of course, I think it's time to get to the more controversial comments that really literally rang around the world. I was in Greece last week at a conference, and I had my Twitter. You get around enough, it's fine. So my jaw, I think I heard the sounds of Americans' jaw dropping when they woke up to tweets from the president saying that 3,000 people in Puerto Rico did not die.
Oh, wait, there's more. So the next day he had more to tweet. He said when Trump visited the island territory last October, officials told him in a briefing 16 people had died. This was long after the hurricane took place. Over many months, it went to 64 people. Then, like magic, 3,000 people killed.
Like magic.
They hired, unclear who, GWU, George Washington Research, to tell them how many people had died in Puerto Rico. How would they not know this? Trump is now questioning himself. The method was never done with previous hurricanes because other jurisdictions know how many people were killed. 50 times last original number, no way. So if there's one thing that's clear about these series of tweets, he does not believe 3,000 people died as a result of the hurricanes in Puerto Rico.
That is very clear. And so multiple facets of those comments attracted fact-checking far and wide.
Yep.
No, it wasn't motivated by Democrats. It wasn't created by Democrats to make him look bad. No, it wasn't based on magic. It was based on science and a method that is used to calculate death tolls in situations where it's really hard to get hard numbers. But we wanted to, and I think many of you already know that. So what we want to do to close out Trump Watch is just kind of go over how this science works and how it may not be precise, but it's on to something more than just 64 people died.
Yeah, so the Trump claim here is ultimately going to rate false. I have to be clear about that. But I do want to say that ultimately the number 3,000 is an estimate, and it was put together by researchers at George Washington. Other groups have tried to do other estimates. An estimate is just that. It is there's could be deviation or error. So the number so here's the bottom line. Sure, Trump is right. The actual storm hits. Tree falls down, water, wind. The number of people who are directly killed, documented as a result, is relatively small. But what researchers were able to do is because of a storm of this magnitude, where power was out, where potable water was problematic, where traversing the island was difficult, what researchers tried to do is they tried to look and say, was there fundamental changes in the mortality rates in Puerto Rico before the hurricanes and after? And so they tried to kind of make a case to say the hurricane had such a huge impact on this island that if we saw a huge spike in deaths, that some of them at least would be related to the hurricane. So basically what researchers from Harvard did is they relied on interviews and asked people about the causes of deaths in their households. Researchers selected about 3,300 households and found 38 deaths after the hurricane, including 3 from direct causes and 12 from interruption of necessary medical services. Then the researchers then extrapolated that data to look at the number of excess deaths and found a 62% increase.
So this is a separate study.
Yes, but
that
it's
was
the
actually
same,
higher than what George Washington found.
correct. But basically what you're doing here is you're trying to look at the way to kind of build a number that is imperfect, because quite frankly it is.
And the researchers say that.
Right. So the first research had the number even higher. I think it was closer to 4,500 excess deaths.
That was the midpoint of a huge range.
Over time, I think more research became able to clear that up a little bit more, where we still have an estimate, but now we feel a little more solid in saying the true number of deaths related to the hurricanes and the impact from them is closer to 3,000, much closer to 3,000 than certainly 65 or 18 or any number Trump was offering in his tweets. All right, that's it for Trump Watch. When we come back, we're going to turn our attention to the 2018 midterms. We're going into Ohio and to a very, very competitive congressional race that could determine the outcome of who controls the U.S. House come next January. Stay with us.
Welcome back to What the Fact. I'm Katie and this is Erin. Now we're 50 days out from the 2018 elections. PolitiFact has you covered by analyzing claims that are going around in the most competitive districts around the country.
And it's a lot of fun. And this week we're going to a suburban Cincinnati district, a very competitive district in Ohio that has really been solidly Republican in recent years. The incumbent there is U.S. Rep. Steve Chabot. He's represented the district since 2011. He's seeking another term in a district that, quite frankly, has been safely Republican. This is a district that in 2016, Chabot won by 19 percentage points. It's also a district that Donald Trump carried by 6.6 percentage points in 2016. But Democrats seeing a wave, handicappers think this is a true toss-up. The local clerk of the court, Aftab Purival, is mounting a really aggressive challenge to Chabot in a race that everyone sees as a true toss-up.
Exactly. That makes it a very key race that we're tracking. And we have 2 claims this week to walk through, one from each candidate. We're going to start with the Democratic challenger, Aftab Purival. He claimed in a recent ad on TV,
Steve Chabot, a career politician who voted to strip away protections from people with pre-existing conditions.
Now this is a familiar refrain that we're hearing from Democrats around the country, but this one is really interesting. It's an interesting situation and we wondered, is it really true? So let's find out.
In a tight race for Ohio's first congressional district, the talk has turned to healthcare. Democrat Aftab Purival is trying to unseat incumbent Republican Steve Chabot. He's recently released an ad attacking Chabot's healthcare record.
If they take away the pre-existing condition protections, you're punishing a childhood cancer survivor for surviving cancer. That's pretty disgusting.
Chabot's vote to take healthcare away from 35,000 people in our district, his vote to increase premiums on people over 50, he's done nothing to lower the cost of prescription drugs. I think we can do better.
Let's home in on this claim that Steve Chabot voted to take away healthcare coverage protections for people with pre-existing conditions. He did, but he's always talked about the importance of offering a replacement program that would include that protection. Chabot's team defends his votes for bills that stripped protections without a backup this way. They say the bills were intended to send a message to then-President Obama and didn't actually have a chance of passing. So Steve Chabot has talked about creating a provision to protect people with pre-existing conditions should the Affordable Care Act ever be repealed. But he still voted to take away those protections without replacements in place or planned.
Okay, Katie, so the claim here is that Chabot voted to strip insurance protections for pre-existing conditions. How'd that rate on PolitiFact's Truthometer?
We rated this claim mostly true. That means the statement is accurate, but it requires additional information that people need to know.
Well, give it to them.
Okay, so what I found most interesting here was actually Shabbat's response, his reason. So he told us, yes, of course I voted for those Obamacare repeal bills, but I did not, and they did include protections for pre-existing conditions, right? But he said everybody knew, because President Barack Obama was in power, that those bills had no chance of getting to his desk or surviving his desk,
right,
even if they passed the Senate. So votes like this, you have to go back in time, they were part of a legislative strategy. They sent a clear message. But Steve Shabbat is telling us he knew that it wasn't really going to happen. So is that really good enough of an excuse? We kind of say, or Aptab Puraval says not really,
right,
you know, actions speak louder than words. And the fact is they voted for this repeal bill without actual legislation behind it that would have secured conditions for people with, protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
We're not here to judge whether you should actually take your legislators' votes seriously or more rhetorically, but we can say that Congress is elected to make laws, and in this case, Shabbat cast some votes that clearly would have repealed the ACA, aka Obamacare, and essentially rolled back the protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Let's do another one. Let's switch sides.
All right.
What is Shabbat talking about?
Shabbat is talking about Hamilton County finances and Puraval's home, kind of performance on his home turf.
Yep. Shabbat is cited in a new ad, a projected $400,000 deficit in Puraval's current office as the Hamilton County Clerk of Court. Now, that's obviously not good, a $400,000 projected deficit, but it's even worse, Shabbat says, because basically it's an office that had a long history of running surpluses. So the attack is basically Puraval came in and turned surpluses into deficits. We'll start with the main claim about the $400,000 projected deficit. That claim is false. That's just incorrect. So as you break it down, was there a projected deficit? Sort of. Basically, in Hamilton County budget documents, the clerk of the courts projected in its general fund a budget deficit of about, actually closer to $500,000 than $400,000. The importance here is that the Hamilton County general budget is only part of what the clerk's office ultimately receives and spends. 1. 2, it's important to know how the Hamilton County Clerk's Office is funded. It's funded by fines, but really the most important thing here is looking at why that projected budget deficit took place. And so basically, Aptab Puraval wanted to create new clerk of the court kind of filing centers, mainly dealing with kind of vehicle registrations. And he wanted to put them out on the edges of the county so that the county could get the benefits of people registering their car in Hamilton County versus some other county.
Okay.
And so he wanted to put some of the resources of the clerk's office, some of the money, into kind of building out those places. He thought, and the thought would be, by spending the money now, you'll make more money in the long run. Okay? So that's where the projected budget deficit comes to. However, there's a twist.
Did the numbers come in as they were expected?
No, then this is the twist, is that basically Puraval was able to go through with his plan in a way that he says will not cost as much money, basically. And so he will be able to, this year, take what was projected as a deficit. And by the way, this is really important. The county budget guy in Hamilton County says, this is all nonsense. It's really not a deficit. You shouldn't count it as a deficit. So that's a factor. But he's basically been able to kind of redo the books in a way that the deficit will end up being a surplus, he says.
We're going to continue looking at claims of big and small, national and local, throughout the next few weeks as we inch closer to Election Day. Until next week, I'm Katie. This is Erin. Thanks so much for watching What the Fact.